Support WrestleTalk!
So, WWE Crown Jewel just finished in Saudi Arabia, and it was it happened, didn't it? It happened. It was one of those shows where it was basically a glorified house show. There was a few defining moments for this show, and there'll be the highlights, and there were some particular lowlights that kind of come back round on themselves when you think about what they've done to the WWE product in the build-up to this show. But we'll get into that more in a minute, and we'll start with the biggest highlight of the event, which was that The Fiend is now the Universal Champion. So this is the follow-up Please Love Us Again match after the Hell in a Cell really kind of ruined all of The Fiend's momentum. And we were like, well, maybe they'll just move him on to something else. But no, we were sticking with the Rollins feud. Here we got pretty much a very similar match. It was Falls Count Anywhere, couldn't be stopped for any reason, so we got a callback spot with a sledgehammer that Seth used as well. People went through tables, people fell off stuff, people put themselves into things. The Fiend took stomp after stomp after stomp, and he just kept coming. I'm not really sure I buy the idea that The Fiend should be this relentless killer that people just know how to slow down but not stop completely yet in his career. That's definitely like a character beat that we could do down the line, but I still think it's too early with The Fiend to even move beyond squash matches. This match with Seth Rollins went, I think, a good 20 minutes. And at times it felt it because there was a lot of setup, a lot of slow, beat down, methodical stuff that actually, admittedly, seemed to get over with the crowd to some degree. There was legitimate screams at one point when The Fiend put himself through the barricade. However, the entire thing culminates with The Fiend backing Rollins up the ramp onto the entrance area. And then Rollins starts his comeback. He hits one stomp, he hits two stomps, he hits three stomps, like we're just workshopping how many stomps it's going to take to put The Fiend down. He eventually hits 8 different stomps and a super kick, knocking The Fiend into this little weird boxed out technical area that they've made that looks perfectly pitched for someone to fall into it. And then a bunch of pyro goes off. Rollins comes down the stairs and he starts pulling out some of the boxes to see if he can find The Fiend. He accidentally, seemingly, sets off another firework, blinding himself briefly. The Fiend pops up out of nowhere, lays in the mandible claw, and then hits the Sister Abigail, and suddenly, 1, 2, 3, we have a new Universal Champion. The lights go out for a second, they come back on, that eerie noise is playing, and The Fiend is holding the red strap and seemingly taking it to SmackDown. I wasn't blown away by the match. I think the match was mostly tarnished by the Hell in a Cell fiasco from weeks ago. And this skewing so closely in terms of storytelling to that didn't exactly help. All they literally did, it felt like, was change the finish. And it was, admittedly, finally, the correct finish to do for this match. The Fiend being the Universal Champion and winning it off Rollins makes sense to me, at least. Rollins winning and going over The Fiend here would have only hurt him as a babyface even more. People were already booing him. People in Saudi Arabia even were booing him here. People were so into The Fiend. The only way to keep Rollins feeling like a babyface champion, or at least top guy, is to have him lose to The Fiend here. Now all we have to worry about is his Twitter use ruining him as a babyface. And as laboured as it was to get into the finale of this match, I at least think that it actually came off very cool once the right outcome came about. So kind of a retroactive looking back and going, well, yeah, actually, I enjoyed that. I'm pleased that this was the final image that we got of Crown Jewel, because I think the landscape of WWE can change now properly now that this event is out of the way, because they've definitely been building to it for a while. And like I'll say, when we get onto some of the lowlights, they've built so much of their current product around pushing to this set of matches. Onto a lowlight though, and there are a few to pick from, but we'll start with Braun Strowman versus Tyson Fury. This and Cain Velasquez were the sort of Fox debut defining moments of WWE in recent memory. This was the WWE has grown bigger than the sport of wrestling. It's now this weird nexus point in which all of sort of combat sports combine, in which people from boxing and from MMA, they show up and they throw down to decide who's the best. Tyson Fury was not the best at wrestling. He's a very good boxer, very undefeated at boxing. He's not very good at taking bumps, running the ropes, kipping up, doing the little forward roll thing. He was doing the fundamental first week of wrestling school wrestling in this match. and not particularly well. And it's weird because Braun Strowman was basically having to do the normal ring general role where someone more experienced leads the match. However, Braun's matches are usually with somebody more experienced who leads the match. So it was kind of the blind leading the blind to some degree. And Tyson, realistically, got very little offense here. He threw a few punches, he dodged out of the way a couple of times, he hit quite a cool little two-footed drop kick on the apron. His own Gypsy King version of the drive-by, I guess. One in a caravan. And it's funny because it feels like it was a very big part of the show that the crowd were very interested in entrances and then lost their way during a lot of the matches. And this was very much the case here with people popping big for Tyson coming out. He came out in full Saudi regalia, coming down to the ring to huge bouts of pyro and all of the kind of razzmatazz you would expect from a show in which money's just been literally thrown at it. However, once the in-ring action started, the crowd went completely dead. They were on their phones, they were turning around, some of them were having conversations. Most people weirdly had earbuds in as if they were listening to something else, like a podcast. Maybe the WrestleTalk one. Hopefully the WrestleTalk one. They could hear us slagging off their show. But Braun did his best to try and win them back. He got up in the ring, he called for all the attention, he did the big, I'm going to run around the ring and do the tackle, and then he hit the tackle and Tyson fell down with very little aplomb because selling is also something you need to learn in wrestling, and it didn't really work out. Tyson manages to very quickly get a bit of a comeback, gets back in the ring, and as Braun is getting in, he decks him with a huge right hand. Braun falls outside, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We get a boxing-style count-out of Braun Strowman on the outside. Tyson Fury's pronounced the winner, and it fell completely flat. Nobody cared about the finish. There was no high point in the match in which to insert it. Everything here was just, oh, that's happened. Oh, that's happened. Great. Braun did manage to get a little bit of his heat back with the running power slam, but it just makes you think, why did we spend so long building to this when it wasn't going to be the big money match they were billing it as? And obviously that's kind of out of WWE's hands in this case because you don't really know how good Tyson Fury is going to be at wrestling. And bless him, he went out there, he gave it his all and did his best. And it was okay in places. And I want to loop back to this argument later on because this is very pertinent to the Cain Velasquez Brock Lesnar thing. Why were they concentrating on building to this match at this show over the debut on Fox, over trying to make Raw make sense, over pushing NXT so maybe it could be AEW in the ratings? I don't know. Let's whiz on to another highlight, and that is that Lacey Evans and Natalya had the first ever women's wrestling match in Saudi Arabia. So this match is actually a bit of a double-edged sword. So it's both a highlight and a lowlight, and I'll explain why in a moment. For one thing, highlight-wise, it is the first ever women's match in Saudi Arabia. And so that meant that people in the crowd, specifically the young girls and the women that WWE went to great pains to show us on cameras, seemingly thousands of cameras that they had filming the crowd at all times, that they were having the best time watching this. They were happy, they were jubilant, they were cheering, they chanted, "This is awesome," as the match was going on. It felt like, for them, that this was an important moment. On the other side of the coin, it didn't quite have that emotional impact because watching it for me was quite an uncomfortable experience. There was a point during Natalya's entrance where a bottle of water thrown had hit her in the knee and she had to walk around it. She then looked a little bit cagey and a little bit upset during the rest of her entrance. They were both dressed in long gear with oversized t-shirts over the top, which obviously you would do for the culture, but looked uncomfortable for them. They also wrestled a match that was slightly cagey and a little bit sloppy and almost like it was moving at half speed. I don't know whether they'd been told to go out there and not do anything too risky, to be a little bit sort of reserved, a little bit demure, but this really felt like 50% of what either of them are actually capable of. And I would have been more interested to see a women's match going out in Saudi Arabia as the first ever women's match that blew the doors off the place. As a like, this is what women can do if they're given the chance, and you should respect them for that. That seems to make more sense to me than here are two women sort of sloppily going through a mostly wrist lock based match that ends with a sharpshooter, and then we're just going to play Bret Hart's music because you know Bret Hart, he's a bloke, isn't he? Bloody good bloke. And I think as much as the price of progress sometimes you've got to take the good with the bad, it's a shame that this match, while yes, historic by definition because it's never happened before, is happening for slightly cynical reasons on a show entirely funded by a guy who's using a PR machine to make his regime seem enticing to Western businesses. And then for WWE to toe that party line on their network, and then to laud all of the press they've got about it with Sports Illustrated, etc., as if it's positive spin, sits wrong with me. So it's one of those things where, yes, it is very good, and it is, in the bubble of Saudi Arabia, a very big deal and a very good thing. Hopefully that was a fairly reasoned debate about it, because I think it occupies both spaces simultaneously, and it's not quite as cut and dry as that is good, that is bad. It is both things. Like Cultaholic. On to what I genuinely think was the match of the night, and probably the most positive thing to come out of this, which was Mansoor versus Cesaro, which equally I think was pandering of the highest order to the Saudi Arabian crowd, but showed that Mansoor could legitimately be a massive star within WWE. I think he's got a great moveset, he's got a good look, he's very expressive and naturally charismatic, and it's a shame that he's only wheeled out once every 6 months to have, oddly, WrestleMania-sized matches against random people so he can go over, and he's not featured on WWE TV the rest of the time. Andy was saying during the live stream that apparently Mansoor has won 8 matches on the Try NXT live events, but I've not seen him on TV since he had that one match before the last Saudi show that he was going to win at. It goes without saying that Cesaro was absolutely amazing in this match and did his very best to make Mansoor look like a superstar. Cesaro knew that he was going to be hoovering up heat like he was a cleaner in hell, left, right and centre. But he played up to that perfectly, pacing and structuring the match perfectly to give Mansoor the perfectly timed comeback, just the right amount of punishment, and the absolute pitch perfect kick out spots. This meant that when they get to their multiple top rope segments, the crowd are at fever pitch. First of all, seeing Mansoor flying off the top with a gut wrench suplex, hitting the canvas really hard, looking like the babyface in peril. And then finally, Mansoor climbing to the top, victorious, soaring through the air with a moonsault and picking up the 1, 2, 3 to get the huge babyface hometown reaction. This is what I would much rather see from the likes of Crown Jewel. Rather than digging up the legends to ruin their legacy and injure themselves and have terrible matches, why not give young and hungry up-and-coming guys who are really good the chance to shine in front of a very, very welcoming crowd? It worked for Buddy Murphy at Super Showdown in Australia, didn't it, when he went over and won the Cruiserweight Championship over Cedric Alexander. That was an amazing match. I'm not saying that this match was up there on that level, but if Mansoor maybe had a bit more TV time and a bit more build, I'd care a little bit more about his character rather than just going, oh, that must be nice for him. And now let's round things off with the final lowlight, the worst bit of the show, the beginning. The show opens with Brock Lesnar versus Cain Velasquez. Brock comes out with Paul Heyman. Cain Velasquez comes out with Rey Mysterio. Despite the fact that Cain Velasquez is trained in the Lucha Libre style of wrestling and has had pretty good matches in AAA, in which he does some surprisingly cool moves, this was pitched like an MMA fight. In MMA fights, Cain Velasquez already has a victory over Brock Lesnar, in which he won the UFC Heavyweight Championship off him. So it's weird that here, Cain got buried. The match started with a bit of spacing, a few punches, a few swing and miss kicks. Brock backs Cain into the corner. Cain hits a knee to the gut/groin area, then kicks Brock in the head. He falls down. Cain dives on him, trying to get the ground and pound going like he's been doing on SmackDown and Raw. But Brock locks in the Kimura, and Cain taps out in about 2 minutes, which is very, very quick. You could have, obviously, 12 Kofi Kingston Brock Lesnar matches in that time, but still, this is really, really quick. And that's the thing, it just makes you think, what was the point of any of what we've been doing recently? The whole of SmackDown on Fox's debut episode was built around the idea of Cain Velasquez debuting and it being a really big deal for Brock Lesnar. Brock Lesnar was supposed to be scared. We buried Kofi Kingston for it. And I think it's just this weird indication of the problem with WWE is that they don't necessarily know what they're building to. They've got all these disparate strands of things they're working on, and none of them feed into one cohesive whole. Raw doesn't know what it's doing at all, seemingly, at the moment. SmackDown felt like it was trying to position itself as the A show and build a audience that didn't just include wrestling fans by bringing in MMA and boxing stars, but then that turned out that that was just building to Crown Jewel too. Meanwhile, NXT is not getting mentioned on any shows and floundering in the viewing figures to AEW. But now NXT is going to be part of Survivor Series. So is that now the focus of all of WWE's programming for this 1 month? Can they only concentrate on things for about 2 weeks? Is that the problem? And that's the thing. This Brock Lesnar Cain Velasquez match was being billed as this big deal. Brock Lesnar's on the back foot. The Beast is on the back foot. Chase him down. Chase him off the cliff like he's a weird mammoth thing. And instead, what's happened is Brock has handily beaten a man he lost to in real life in a fake fight. So Cain looks like a bloody dummy here because he's beaten Brock in real life, but then he signed a 3-year deal with WWE. And in his first worked like an MMA fight on WWE TV, he loses like a chump. It wasn't even like they did wrestling moves here, so they could say, well, Cain wasn't prepared for the WWE way of doing things because Brock is obviously a very well-decorated WWE wrestler. Cain lost at a match type that is meant to be his specialty, essentially losing a striking battle because he worked himself into a submission. And yeah, they tried to put that over very briefly on commentary, but this just felt like an absolute burial of Cain, and also like he was the afterthought in this feud overall. Realistically, this whole feud has been built around Rey Mysterio. Brock injured Rey. Rey brings out Cain. Cain can't do the job here. Rey gets into the ring at the end of this match and he starts wailing on Brock with chair shots. So does this mean that Rey, who is on Raw, is going to be vying for the WWE Championship, which is on SmackDown? So the brand split has also now gone out the window. Everything has gone out of the window from this one pay-per-view, house show, pay-per-view, Sweet 16 birthday party for the Saudi Prince. I'm not saying I don't like the idea of a Rey Mysterio versus Brock Lesnar match. I'd love that. And that would also be a lovely way for Rey Mysterio to finish out his time in WWE with one final brief run as WWE Champion. That would be fantastic. I would love that. I would pop massively. Rey Mysterio is my boy. However, why have we fed Cain Velasquez, Kofi Kingston, Rey's son Dominic for a flat pop on a show in Saudi Arabia so that Brock can win here and build to a match with Rey Mysterio? And not only that, in the process of sacrificing all of those people to this one storyline, think about all the other things that have been sacrificed to this one show. We've sacrificed what Raw's doing because we've just been building Team Flair versus Team Hogan over there. We've sacrificed what SmackDown is doing because we've just been building to these big money matches with Braun Strowman and Tyson Fury and Brock Lesnar and Cain Velasquez that neither turned out to be the spectacles of sporting achievement that we quite believe they would be. And we've also sacrificed moving on from the story of Seth and The Fiend at Hell in a Cell, instead going into the holding pattern of that so we can redo the finish of it here. Overall, Crown Jewel was a very weird show. It had some big highlights that came at the end of quite long, quite laborious matches, and it really felt like a house show vibe with a lot of the fun stripped out of it. Like I said earlier, I think the exciting thing about it is that it's over, and we can now move on with the slightly new status quo of WWE. The Fiend is the Universal Champion and is on SmackDown, so tomorrow that is going to be a very exciting show. My big highlight, my big takeaway is that Mansoor should be pushed more on WWE programming. Get him on NXT TV. Do something with him. So the next time we go back to Saudi Arabia and you dig him out of the closet, maybe you don't have to dig so hard. Maybe people will care more when he wins and you won't just be relying on the fact that, oh, he's from here. Thank you for watching. Head down to the comments below to let me know what you thought of WWE Crown Jewel and what you think they're going to do with The Fiend now that he is the Universal Champion. Please also click the videos that have appeared on screen to watch more awesome WrestleTalk stuff and give us a subscribe because it helps us grow and eventually we're going to take over YouTube. Probably not, but we'll get as big as we can and we'll see where we go from there. I've been El Fakador and that was Lucha.